we move on to some of the other records that you may use to manage feedback and communications. Now, when we get into the communications subject, we will look at a whole communication plan. When you talk to people, when you send stuff out, when you're not, and a lot of these documents we're going to go through now will come into play again. But I just wanted to be able to provide them to you this week so that you can have them there if you need them. Okay? So, a team member performance review. Now, I'm not a HR manager, so I'm not going to try and teach you the big one. But a team member performance review is actually what you use when you're actually sitting down with a team member and sort of say, yes, you've done great, or no, you haven't, or these are the things you need to improve by, or this is what you need training in, or whatever. Now, I've given you an example document, or I'll upload an example document, and it's looking at the project, the team member's name, and it goes through the position description that you may or may not, depending on whether you've actually needed to do that. And then I've put some standard information in here, just relates to, key result here is looking at occupation, health and safety, communication, etc. Now, we're not going to cover that as a subject. I'm only including those in there so that you can choose to use them or delete them as you want. The key result areas that you've actually identified as part of, remember we talked about that in week 1, the key result areas and the KPIs. So you may choose to put some of those specific result areas from your project in here and put the things that they should have been measured by and whether they've done well or whether they haven't, and then you might identify that somebody hasn't done what they should have because they need training, so therefore you've got to provide training on something or whatever it may be.
That's like a performance review.
Yes, it is a performance review document. So again, it depends on the duration and the complexity of your project. If your project's going on for 2 or 3 years, someone somewhere is going to have to do a performance review. It may be on their general day-to-day role, their permanent employee, or it may be their performance because they've been allocated to the project full-time. Or it might be a combination of both. So it might be you and the HR manager that's doing that review.
How long between times should we do it? Should it be every 6 months?
It's usually 2 cycles a year, from what I understand, but again, I'm not a HR manager. So I'm only giving this as an example of a document that you can use. And, again, it's going back to the formalities of writing things down so you can refer to them in the longer term if you need to. And it covers you. Like if somebody's really causing a problem, you may choose to turn around and say, okay, I'm going to schedule a performance review with you next week on Tuesday, 10 o'clock, be here. And then you may bring in the sponsor, or you may forewarn the HR manager that you've got issues, and so therefore you do a performance review then, so you can plan on what you're going to do to help sort it out. But I'm not providing all of the warning documents and all the other things that would normally become part of managing a person who was not actually performing to the required standard, simply because I could be providing you with stuff which is inaccurate, because as I say, I'm not a HR manager and I don't claim to be. Okay, so this is just one document you can choose to use if you want to.
So just to clarify, the extent that you would go into it from that point of view would be depending on the project and if they would be through a HR person in that department to write all these documents and reviews and what have you, or whether the onus is on you to be able to do that as part of the project. Yeah,
one of the things you'll need to do, and it's actually in the summary at the end of it, is you really need to know what you're responsible for and what you're not. If you are responsible for that team for 2 years and you are it, then you need to learn those things. You need to have those resources available to you. But you should still have access to people. I mean, if that was me and I was actually going to run a project for 2 years and I was going to be in charge of 100 people in a project, I'd make sure that I had a HR resource allocated as one of the stakeholders that I could pay for as one of the team members, because you are going to have people needing leave, you're going to have people who don't perform, you're going to have people who need to be replaced, you're going to have that sort of thing happening throughout the whole thing. So you're going to need to have a HR expert on your team. Okay, so a tool which is a means of giving feedback. One of the reasons I've given that to you is that under the NTIA standard they actually say that you've actually got to give feedback back to your team member. So this is just a means to do it. Okay, so when you're actually managing a project, one of the other documents that you may have is a request for change. Now, a request for change document is usually you've identified by going through and updating your project plan, and updating the work breakdown structure of the task, you've actually realised from your feedback back from your team members that something's not working. So what you originally anticipated in the scope of your document, or what you originally planned to do, or the resources you were going to use, something's got to change. So it might impact the timeline, it might impact what you're going to do, or it might impact the actual budget, or whatever it may be. So What you're going to do then is you're going to ask permission for the people who signed off the scope and signed off all the project plan for change. So you say, okay, look, these things have happened, and so this is why we need to recognise now that we're going to change direction or do something a bit different. So this document is, again, just an example, and it's a request for change. So quite often when you're referring to a status report, you'll have RFC numbers, and a request for change is it's just going to document exactly what's going on and whether it's approved or disallowed, and of course then it's signed off. Now, one of the things you'll actually get to have is lots of folders, and you'll have a register of requests for change. So you might end up with lots of individual sheets of paper that have been signed off, and then you may have a summary at the front of it which sort of says these are the requests for change number, what the topic was, whether it's been approved or declined. So this again is just another document that you may choose to use as a tool. So it's part of the communication back to the team or back to the rest of the stakeholders in the project.
These requests for change, would that be brought about if you found that a design was inadequate, or would this request for change because of one of the stakeholders wants a certain different outcome?
Anything that's going to, if you've designed your project plan properly, so you've identified exactly what you're going to do, what budget you've got, who you're going to get to do it, blah, 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 then you've started the work and something changes. So you've identified that there's an inadequacy in the specification, there is a change in stakeholders and they've changed what they want. They don't want the green widget anymore, they want the purple widget. Anything like that that's going to impact your ability to deliver in full on time, you put the request for change in. Even if it's not going to cost you anything, it just covers your butt.
I request, now if it's going to cost something, that would go up to the project manager and go to...
You are the project manager.
Well, if you take it the next step, that becomes a variation of the contract with cost most times.
Yeah.
So you tell your poor stakeholders, well, look, it's going to cost you something dollars.
That's right. So this will be the first step in a contract variation, yes.
So what we can do if there's a piece of equipment that is delayed to be delivered to the site, for example, this will have impact to...
Okay, well, so if somebody hasn't performed or somebody hasn't delivered what they should have delivered,
Yeah.
then that's not... Yeah, that's not really a request for change. That would actually be you managing that under a contractual obligation. So if they've got a contract to deliver things in a certain time frame, etc., that's when in that contract you would have a
delivery time.
you might have a back charge clause. So if you don't do this, then we're going to charge you this every day until you do. So normally in a contract, and that's where a good contract negotiation exercise with people who know what they're doing says, okay, well this is what you've got to do, but if you don't do it, and that's what happens in a lot of companies, they miss that when they're writing procedures or they're doing anything like that, they actually say what you've got to do, but they don't say what you don't got to do. They don't tell you what you shouldn't do. But and in a contract, a good contract actually covers what you need to do and what will happen if you don't do it. Okay, and then as a project manager, it's
So this is more for corrective actions during the course, isn't it?
This isn't a corrective action, no. A corrective action is usually a document that's managing a process and saying, say for example, it's an occupation health and safety issue and there's an air hit and somebody nearly got hurt. The corrective action would be put in place to actually change the procedure or the behaviour of that activity so the person wouldn't be at risk the next time.